This is the City Sites Podcast with Larry Kutzler.
Is it more of a challenge to raise kids today more than ever? Right? Mm-hmm. With social media, with everything you're talking about like sort of like
Ask
the big
why.
brother approach?
Ask why.
That's what I want to know. Why is that?
Why do you think?
Tell me.
I want you to think, and you don't have kids. I want you to think. Why do you think it's harder today than it was when we were 12 years old, 6 years old?
The first answer that would have to be social media, just because it has a greater influence than anything we've ever seen with our kids. I mean, growing up, I was the kid that we would always just play sports in the front yard. That's all it was.
Yeah.
Right? This was pre-beeper, pre-cell phone, pre-social media.
Yep.
There was no influence over your life other than at school.
We all know one of the most important things we can do is live out our faith for those who see us all the time. For those of the people that live with us, that see us when we are sad, angry, super tired, irritable, those are the people that are truly gonna see the realness of our faith or the unrealness of our faith. So how do you teach your kids about Jesus? How do you teach your teenagers about Jesus when they see you fail more than anybody else?
This can seem like a lot of work and even pressure to caregivers who are caring for infants and young children. It's certainly true that the interactions between those caregivers and the infants and toddlers is of paramount importance, but it's not meant to be overwhelmingly complicated. We often say that it's hard work being a parent. It's not necessarily an incredibly complicated job. If it were, we would have gone extinct a long time ago. We are meant to do this job. We are meant to feel connected to our infants and the infants to us. And we are meant to find delight and enjoyment and excitement in the growth of that infant and toddler over time. Things can get in the way because we're so wired in. Our devices are such an important part of our day-to-day life that it may require us as adults to put down our devices, to put down our phone, and to recognize that if you're having lunch together, that's a time to talk. That's a time to tell a silly joke or to hear a story or to soothe a fear. That's precious time, and it requires us to be somewhat disciplined about the use of technology in our own lives.
This podcast is about ideas, concepts, and principles that come from the Bible. The influence from our culture has failed us, leaving us without hope. Today, hope is still alive with God. Thanks for joining us.
I've been associated with many ministries over the years, but few stand out like my featured guest today. Connected Families is a unique ministry that started about 2002 with a couple by the name of Jim and Lynn Jackson. They are the founders of this ministry, and Connected Families helps parents with training, with coaching, and a system of 4 principles that steers this ministry to succeed in helping parents. Stacy Bellward is with me today. So Stacy, you're a parent, you're a Bible study teacher, you've even got a Bible study that's published, and you work with parents to be better parents. You do that all week long. Is it harder to be a parent today?
That's a good question, and if you ask the parents, I think we would say yes. It is harder today. There's a lot of new factors that parents are dealing with as they're raising their kids that have never been in our world in the past. There's no precedent. Our parents didn't have to deal with cell phones. And yet at the same time, I often think back to Abraham. And Abraham raised Isaac with Sodom and Gomorrah right next door. And I always keep that in perspective because when I want to get into this pity party of woe is me and this is so difficult and, raising these kids is just hard and, where are my guides to help me? I think, listen, God is our guide and God helped Abraham to raise Isaac right there next to Sodom and Gomorrah. So yeah, it is hard. I think screens are an issue. Anxiety and mental health is an issue. We just walked through COVID. No one else has done that in history in that way and isolation. And so there are a lot of unique issues that parents are working with today. I think that probably one of the biggest things is because of technology and the way that our world works, our kids really can separate themselves from us pretty easily. And what I mean by separate is emotionally separate. They can just kind of walk away from their parents inside their heads and in their hearts, even though you still live in the same house. And that can even happen at a young age. And so we as parents really need to be more tuned towards what does connection look like. And that looks different these days than maybe it did in the past because there's so many distractions, both for the kids and for us. So yes, it is more difficult. Yes, it is different, but there's so much hope.
I'm glad to hear you say that because when kids are into their technology, there's so many conflicting messages, right? There's the messages of the culture on the screen, and then there's messages at home and in church. And those, I would think, conflict at times, and kids walk away somewhat either ambivalent or they're just kind of numb to everything because there's so much information, as you said. And parents or families are more fragmented than they've ever been before. So that's one of the reasons why we need a ministry like Connected Families. Connected Families helps parents through all of these modern dilemmas, if we can use that, to help parents kind of corral their children into manageable units or whatever you want to call it. Is that correct?
Yeah, we work to bring families together in a way that's connected. In fact, one of our little taglines that we actually even printed on mugs is, but connect first. You know, so often you see the t-shirts that say coffee first. I think coffee first in the morning. We just really want to encourage parents. What is connection first? First before, discipline, before anything. Like, how do you connect with your kids? And I think that's what we're looking for with families.
When I and my wife were raising our kids, Stacy, we had focus on the family, and that was a broad umbrella of all kinds of topics for the family, but they didn't have as many aids that you have today or we have today to help parents specifically with family issues. So Connected Families not only takes the biblical principles that is found in the Bible to help raise kids to having a healthy character, they also use brain science. Now that's can be a catchword or a word that to some Christians go, whoa, science, but you don't see it that way. Why?
No, we don't have scientists on staff, but we sure love the research. And so I think that there are a number of things that really make Connected Families unique. But one of the things that many parents tell us is we just love how you bring faith together with science, brain science. So what we like to say is all of our material is trauma informed and science informed. And so we're looking at the research. We're thinking about what does the research say? What does the Bible say? And then how do we make that practical? And we do that with everything that we produce, whether it's a podcast or our blog posts, or when we are speaking and doing workshops, as we create online courses. We want to bring the Bible and science and make it practical for parents so that they have tools that they can use every day. And I think one super great example of that is in something that we teach called do-overs. And do-overs are for parents, we like to say first, and then the kids second. But, as we're going through life, parents, we're not perfect. We explode. We react to our kids in ways that we're not proud of. But we can do a do-over. And when we do that, we pause, we stop, we take a breath, we say, hey, Lord, I need help here. We maybe go out the door, come back in the door and say, hey, kids, can I please have a do-over? I was not proud of how I just showed up. And then you do it again. And as we model that for our kids, then when we're asking our kids, hey, you want to make that right, what you just did, they might say, can I just do a do-over? Can I have a second try to make this right? There's so much brain science in that. I've just stopped my neural pathways from going down the same road they do again and again. I've stopped that. I've come back. I've done it again. So I made a new neural pathway to say, I'm going to react different this time. And then we celebrate that. So, I used to like tell my kids, I'm patting myself on the back. I did that different. Did you see me do that different? Or give me a high five because I did that different. That's brain science too, because now I'm actually going to make like future changes are going to come a lot faster. So we love do-overs here at Connected Families. And that was the science behind it. But if you think about the faith behind all of that, that is the gospel. That is, I can change. I'm not stuck in my sins, right? God is giving me the ability to listen to the Holy Spirit and say, no, let's do that different. And then I have forgiveness, and I can ask my kids for forgiveness, and I can give them forgiveness when they need it. And we can be washed clean, and then we can celebrate that process. So it's brain science and it's gospel all mixed together.
I love that, do-overs. I mean, that is grace. And do-overs are not only good for parents, they're good for husbands. Because I'm always doing it over. Honey, can I do a do-over? So yes, I mean, it's not just for kids, it's for all of us, really. Yeah. So speaking about brain science, you recently launched your newest online course. And it has a lot to do with brain science because you're dealing with sensitive children. Tell us about that, because I think this is fascinating.
Our founders, Jim and Lynn Jackson, Lynn is an occupational therapist, and she has worked with families for 20 years, coaching them. So has worked with families who have sensitive and intense kids. That's not a specific diagnosis, but these are just the kids that find life harder. They are harder to parent. They experience the world in more dramatic ways. And so Lynn, after 20 years of working with these families, has spent the last couple of years writing this online course where she has brought together understanding for parents. First session is what's going on with my child. I don't think that's the exact title, but it's something like that. It's bringing understanding to what is actually happening in my home with my child. And there's a lot of brain science in that. So it just starts with an understanding of stress factors. And those could be anything from an actual diagnosis of ADHD or autism to just plain trauma, adoption or anything. There could be picky eating or screen issues. There's just a lot that would be a stress factor. And then she brings such clarity to how does that come out in daily life? What are the fight or flight reactions? And then how do our responses as parents affect that? So she has a diagram, and she teaches that in the course. She teaches it along with Lydia Rex, who's also one of our coaches. But there's two sides of the diagram. One side is the stress cycle, so it brings understanding for parents. But then there's pathways over to the healing cycle. Actually, everyone, do-overs are one of them. That's one of the paths. We can change the way things were, and we can do it different. So, the course is deep and wide, Larry. I don't know if I can do it justice even in a couple of words.
Well, I think you're doing good.
It's bringing hope.
Well, I've often wondered, Stacy, and again, I'm not a clinical psychologist or a scientist or anything. I'm just a retired pastor. But I've wondered, I have some ADHD kids in my family, and my wife says, it all started with you. But, it seems like there's more of these children these days. Or are we just becoming more aware of them? They've always been there, but we've misdiagnosed them or whatever. But it seems like everywhere today, there has been this ADHD diagnosis. What do you think about that?
I'm not a doctor, or I don't know if I can really speak to that. I know that in the course, there is a quote. I don't have it in front of me, but it is essentially saying that the world is harsher to sensitive and intense kids right now, and they are working through a lot more. And I can't speak to why that is true, but it just is.
You have a 4-principle framework, you call it, that drives this ministry, and I'm telling you, it's just outstanding. And you use it for parents. I use it for everyday life. Tell us about those 4 principles, would you?
So one of the unique things about Connected Families, people said this to us, so we started saying it. It's the refrigerator magnet says it all. The framework fits on a refrigerator magnet. There's 2 sections of it. One section is kind of a smashed pyramid triangle, and then the other section are these bubbles that come off, and it's got 4 layers to it. And so the triangle valuable part of it is the actions that parents take, and the actions that we take are working to communicate messages to our kids. And so in the very bottom, which is where you start, it's the foundation, we're working to communicate the message to our kids. You are safe with me. We want to receive and pass on God's grace and his truth. There's a lot there. The second layer is to connect with our kids, which communicates you are loved no matter what. Third layer is as we coach our kids, communicate you are called and capable. And the very top layer, which has the smallest real estate, is to correct our kids. And that communicates to our kids, you are responsible for your actions. And we have a book, Jim and Lynn wrote a book that's called Discipline that connects with your child's heart. We also have an online course that really dives deep into that framework and teaches each of those levels and the messages that we're trying to communicate. But those 4 messages are transformational. We say that framework is memorable, biblical, and transformational, and it really is.
It really is. I have to attest to that. So you have online training courses. Some of them are free. Some of them there's a fee. And you have coaching. How does coaching work?
We have a coaching certification program. So we have people all over the world that are coming to us to be certified to understand the framework and then work one-on-one with parents through that framework. We have, I think probably more than 70 coaches right now. And so people can meet with them one-on-one. We have some coaches on our staff, which is how it got started, because we were meeting with families one-on-one. And we had a wait list that went on and on. So we knew we had to expand this. So when families meet with one of the coaches, it's typically a 4-session process. And so they go through each of those layers of the framework and dig down into understanding how to apply that framework to their individual situation.
Well, it's a wonderful ministry. Lastly, Stacy, you host a podcast that I'm also a part of in terms of I do the editing and production. But you talk to people, all kinds of experts, and you talk to your coaches. What's the bottom line here? What's your objective for the podcast?
Our objective is that we want to encourage parents to give them practical tools that they can use today. So we produce a lot of content in lots of ways. Podcast is just a fantastic way that we can pass on God's grace to them, right? Parenting is so hard, and we do fail, and we are not perfect, but God's grace is for us. And so our objective is we want parents to receive God's grace and truth so that they can pass that grace and truth on to their kids. And so we do that by inviting our own staff, guests. We make it practical. We talk about screens. We talk about faith. We talk about all sorts of parenting issues. And we're so grateful for you, Larry, because you're the one that makes us sound great in that podcast.
Well,
and the podcast is booming. It's doing really, really well.
Yeah, I'm so happy. But, I can't endorse you folks enough. And I think every church should have a link to Connected Families because there's so much help that families need today that the pastoral staff just don't have time or necessarily are equipped to handle. So, Stacy, in our final moment together, give us an address that people can find out more about Connected Families.
Yeah, connectedfamilies.org is our website. We're killing it on social media. You can find us there. We're actually launching a partnership program probably third quarter of this year because we care so much about children's, families, youth pastors, and we want to support you in your work. And so stay tuned, get on our mailing list to hear more about it. But that partnership program is going to be a place where Connected Families can come alongside pastors and churches, daycares, Christian schools, so that we can be a resource for you as you help families.
Once again, give us that web address, would you, Stacy?
Yeah, connectedfamilies.org.
We are bringing a bold statement about Christ. He's our only hope to face the darkness in our day. Thanks for joining us for the City Sites Podcast.
Once again, I want to thank Stacy Bellward for being our guest today from Connected Families. You can find their information on Connected Families also on our website. They're one of our featured guests on our website page, and that is citysitesurbanmedia.com. Every Friday, of course, we're here talking with people who make a difference in our world through their ministry, through their lives and testimonies. We want to thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for joining us today. Every Friday, we bring you this podcast with interviews with people who are challenging the status quo of Christianity and challenging the cultural norms of our day. Please help us get the word out by sharing the link to this podcast with your online friends and family. Our website also contains other podcasters who are part of the City Sites network of communicators, all sharing the good news of Jesus Christ. Our website is citysitesurbanmedia.com.